Thanks, everyone. What a pleasure to be back here. It's been several years, so I'm super pumped, and hope you have some energy left from all the sessions and everything. First of all, Martin, Sybil, thank you for making this happen. I did put on a conference once in 1996, and I know what goes into that, so thank you. Okay, so I got a lot to do. I've never given this talk before. This is a brand new speech, so I really have no idea what's going to happen, and we're all just getting ready, so you buckle up, I guess, is what you say. Let me just quickly just give you a little bit of orientation here. I'm going to be talking about risk management. I'm not a risk manager. I did start my career on Wall Street working in credit risk, and then market risk, and finally global risk before I started Industrial Logic. So I was around a lot of risk managers, and we were managing risk. I was just writing software for it. But it kind of seeped into my being in some way, this managing of risk. And I want to say that I think this topic is very near and dear to my heart. That's why I wanted to talk about it today. So let's jump forward here. In late 1999, or in sometime in 1999, I heard about a conference happening in Chieti, Sardinia. It was called XP2025, and it was the very first conference on extreme programming. Just so happens my best friend lives in Chieti, and so I'd already been visiting Chieti all throughout the 90s. And then come to find there's a conference in 2000 right there. So I wrote a paper called Patterns in XP. Back then I was really into the connection between extreme programming and software patterns. Wrote this paper, submitted it, they accepted it. And at the time I was doing a lot of extreme programming for a startup in San Francisco. And long story short, I was having so much fun doing that that I didn't actually go to the conference. So basically, the first conference in 2000 I did not go to. But I did go to the next four, and those were all wonderful. And when we did leave, Sardinia finally, Genoa was incredible, and Garmisch was amazing. And then I went to several others over the years, which was very nice. I want to point out in 2001, I had already met Adamar, because I met Adamar in the patterns community. A lot of the people in the extreme programming community came out of the patterns community. And Adamar was there. This was you see yourself there, Adamar, right? Yeah. More hair, but that's the way it goes. So around 1999 till around 2003, I was writing this damn book. And it was like, I wasn't a professional writer doing it all the time. I'd work, and then I'd go back, and if I was in a hotel and wherever, I would be writing. It took a long time, but I got through this book, and it did really well. I'm happy to say it sold a lot of copies. I won an award for it. It was fantastic. Now I'm leading to something that's not so fantastic. I decided to create an online course to teach it after I'd finished publishing it. So it was out there. It was 2004. I was like, let's make a course for this so people could learn this topic. And I had some colleagues. And we decided to call our new course, Refactoring to Patterns Interactive. Okay? And, we're building the course. We were programming. That's what we do. We program. And I wasn't so sure if it would sell. So I was having those kinds of feelings like, I don't know. And, I'd go to clients, come back, and my colleagues were programming. And it was working. Everything looked good, it worked. But they were mercilessly refactoring. Okay? They were really, really grinding on that code, like making it exquisite. And I was having this feeling like, I don't think we need to be doing that because we don't even know if this thing's going to sell. And they did not like to hear that. They're like, we're professionals. We're extreme programmers. We refactor mercilessly. And I was like, yeah, I know. I can do that too, but I don't feel so good about it right in this particular context. And what ended up happening was we did sell a bit of it. I'd say we broke even, let's look at the math. But then we realized what we learned from that experience was this was too advanced. People had to learn refactoring first before they got to refactoring to patterns. And so we pivoted into more basic training after that. But it was an interesting experience, but I'll never forget those feelings because I didn't have language back then to describe it. Lean Startup came along, several years later and gave the vocabulary, fortunately. but I didn't have that language there. I just had those feelings. All right, so what is risk management in software engineering? What is this? This is the best definition I could, kind of come up with. I usually look at things on the internet and I change them to suit my needs and whatever. So it's a means of systematically evaluating threats, developing strategies to minimize their impact, and continuously monitor and adjust plans, right? It's a continuous thing you're doing. It involves proactively minimizing the likelihood and impact of negative events, right? That's kind of what or risk management is. Now, you may be familiar with this thing, modern agile, these 4 principles. The last one, the bottom one there, make safety a prerequisite, is a very important principle, and it ties into all this, right? This is not a talk about modern agile, but making safety a prerequisite is certainly related to our topic. So what does the collective part mean, right? The collective risk management. What is this? Well, XP, how many of you know about this practice that's called collective code ownership? Just show of hands here. Okay, so a lot of you do. Collective code ownership is this concept that anyone can change any code anywhere at any time. You are free to make changes in the entire code base if you're on a true extreme programming team. Okay, it's allowed. There's no sections that are locked down. There are basically, many different ways of doing it, but there's 3 common ones. There's a solo owner of a part of the code. They own it, you can't change it unless they let you, unless they accept your changes. Then there's like a small group that owns it. It's another common pattern. And then there's this shared ownership or collective ownership model, right? And if you look at a piece of code, this is actually our e-learning software itself. I'm making this up, but let's just say that Samantha owns that section of the code, and Munib and Paula own that section, and so on and so forth. We have owners of areas of the code. Now, we don't, because we don't work this way. We're extreme programmers, and we just say anyone can change anything at any time. The reason we say that is we have a lot of safety practices. Making safety a prerequisite, turns out, is a big part of extreme programming. Many of the extreme programming practices provide safety. That's why it's such a wonderful method. So if you're in this sort of solo or small group ownership model, there are risks associated with that. There are often knowledge silos, right? You talk about knowledge silos, right? Only if one person or a few people know that code, and if they're gone, nobody knows what it does. We don't like that in extreme programming. Low bus factor, XP would talk about the bus factor, or some would use a more, sort of analogy like winning the lottery instead of the bus, because who wants people hit by a bus? Slower delivery, right? Because often you're waiting on the owner to do stuff. The owner has to accept things, so you're slowing down delivery. By the way, I had to manually create this rows that animate like this because I use Google Slides and it doesn't support this. So these are all manually done. I hope you're happy with this. Inconsistent quality, less feedback, more duplication, more divergence, because you're just looking at your solo, you're in your silo looking at the code that you manage, and you don't look at much else typically. So less learning, right? Because you're not moving all around the code base, you have ownership. A lot of people think ownership is the way to go. Like they really do. They think they will attribute problems to a lack of ownership. I think there's a bigger problem there. It's usually a lack of valuing quality code. If you value quality code, you will make it happen. And then you don't need to worry about the ownership model. And this style, this soloing or the small group style, it kind of impedes what XP is about. The pairing and ensembling that we do is geared towards helping us learn the code base, the large code base, and work with each other, deal with the cognitive load, deal with all the complexity together as pairs or ensembles. So collective code ownership, I don't want to make it sound like it doesn't have any risks either. Collective code ownership has risks too. There's less or no responsibility. People say this all the time, but nobody's responsible because everybody's responsible. Oh, okay. Superficial knowledge. Developers might lack deep understanding because they don't own that one module and they get a deep understanding. They're moving all over the place. So maybe they lack superficial, they have superficial knowledge. More integration conflicts. If anyone can change anything at any time, we may have integration conflicts, merge conflicts. The fact of the matter is, there's plenty of ways to defend from this. Inconsistent code base without strong standards. There's diverse coding styles. So the one owner here is going to write code one way, another owner there is going to write code a different way. You're going to have this crazy diverse style. Now, any of you who know XP know the answer to this, right? There's stuff that manages this. High cognitive load, understanding the whole system to make changes anywhere is mentally demanding, right? So that's what you could say are potential risks of collective code ownership. But we have things to deal with this. Whole team, first of all, is a concept from XP. It's that the whole team together tackles everything, right? It's a whole team. Everybody together is trying to work on whatever problems are in front of us. We're working as a team. It's a true team. And of course, there's all kinds of different forms of testing in extreme programming, and I won't get into those details of manual or automated or exploratory and so on and so forth. Superficial knowledge. Well, we don't have superficial knowledge because we pair an ensemble and we refactor and we learn our way around the code. We also do continuous integration. So we don't have these terrible merge conflicts. We're integrating constantly. We have a coding standard. Hopefully we still are doing that today, but XP always had a coding standard, right? This is how we write code. So if I look anywhere in the system, we should be following the coding standard. And refactoring often is needed to make that happen. And finally, for the high cognitive load, pairing and ensembling again, and if something's like very complex, we simplify it with refactoring. So we have all kinds of practices to deal with any of these perceived risks. Now this talk is not about collective code ownership, okay? So I want to get off that topic, but I just want to mention here that collective code ownership has supporting practices to actually make it happen, okay? Because we're going to see the same thing with collective risk management. So, is collective code ownership worth it? I believe it is because we have a lot of benefits. Enhanced knowledge sharing and bus factor improvement. No one gets hit by a bus. No. Higher code quality and maintainability. Improved development efficiency and flow. Faster feedback loops and early bug detection. Increased team cohesion and collaboration, and greater adaptability and responsiveness to change. I look at those and I really think those are true benefits of collective code ownership. So let's get back into risk management now. Is it typically siloed or shared? What do you think in your experience? Do you see that risk management tends to be done by just a few individuals on a team and the rest just are doing the work? I see some shaking heads here. That's what I see. I see things like this. Imagine these little boxes here are different responsibilities of an actual software product. And I'm talking about marketing and sales and support and development and whatever, dealing with regulators, if it's a regulated piece of software, all kinds of stuff can be in those boxes. And what you typically see here is, owners of them. We have sort of risk management happening, but it's happening by individuals. And there might be a little overlap, but, people own those areas, and they don't tend to work as a team. They're just sort of doing their part, right? The salesperson is doing all the sales, and there's lots of risks in the sales, but, Robert might not know about them. Robert may have no idea of the problems happening when sales are trying to be done because they don't intermix. They're not a collective. So it's typically siloed, in my experience. It's one of the things that I find difficult about the way things are done and why I think we need collective risk management. So what are common software product development risks? There's hundreds and hundreds of risks in doing software. But I kind of tried to boil it down to four main areas, four categories. So there's the product and market alignment risks, okay? Are we building the right thing, and is the market accepting it, and are we succeeding in the marketplace? Development and delivery execution risks, right? That's pretty self-explanatory, I think, right? Are we delivering it, developing it? Organizational and people risks, right? That happens. And then strategy and operational governance risks, stuff like that. So we're going to now look at a variety of real-world stories, okay? I'm going to read to you some stories from Joy of Agility because it's filled with all kinds of stories. And these stories are, in this case, these are stories that I think illustrate aspects of collective risk management or of just risk management in general. We're going to start with a story about a spreadsheet. So the product and market alignment risks is this subject right now. Product and market alignment risks. Just let's go over some risks there. So poor understanding of customer needs is one of them. Very common risk, right? You don't understand the customer needs. It's a problem. Unrealistic timelines and scope creep. Happens all the time, right? Insufficient external collaboration. You're simply not collaborating enough with your users. And poor ROI for whatever you're requesting. You want all these features and all this stuff, but actually when we build it, we don't get much happening. You're not picking the right stuff because maybe you're not spending enough time with your customers. Typical risks. All right, so I'm going to read a story to you now. I've never done it this way before. I usually just tell the story, but I thought I'd try this. A team of developers at a Fortune 50 automotive company was creating software for car dealers to manage vehicle orders. They'd been asked to build a feature that had a complex and awkward workflow, and the team had a better idea. It would allow the car dealers to access data quickly and easily via a spreadsheet and take a fraction of the time to implement. They presented their idea to the product owner, who promptly rejected it without explanation. Feeling perplexed and frustrated, the developers decided to build the spreadsheet feature anyway. They configured analytics to make sure they could report usage of the feature once it was released, and they did one more thing. They kept it secret from the PO. This is a true story. Once the feature was live, the developers told the users about it. The users loved it, and the usage metrics proved it. The developers then showed the high usage data to the PO. The PO was not happy. And he was quite vocal about his unhappiness. He really was. He told all kinds of other people and other managers in the area. His team had defied him. The feature had taken less than 4 hours to implement and release to the customer, and it was an immediate hit. But the victory caused the team's relationship with the PO to sour. In fact, the relationship had already been suffering because the PO wanted total control over what to build. He felt he already knew how the application needed to be designed, including what it should look like and how it should interface with the customer. Features didn't need to be validated with customers since the PO was convinced that he already knew exactly what was needed. This was quite a PO we had here. Meanwhile, the software team included brilliant craftspeople, people who spent a great deal of time thinking about their users, connecting with them multiple times a week, asking them questions, observing their behavior, and listening to their most painful issues. These technical people had perfectly good ideas about what their users needed, but the PO was unwilling to hear them. He lived in a world in which certain people specify what to build, and others build it. Right? That's a very old-fashioned world, in my opinion. He simply wanted his team to be busy building the features he specified, maintaining clear roles and responsibilities, a phrase I hate. The developers, on the other hand, only wanted to solve their users' greatest pain points and build the most valuable software for them as safely and efficiently as possible. Jeff Patton, an expert in agile product management and author of User Story Mapping, once said, "Product ownership is a team sport. You'll increase your chances for success dramatically if you allow your team members to suggest and experiment with ideas and take an active role in producing happy customers." And every story in the book ends with a punchline or some sort of advice. This is make product ownership a team sport. Okay? That's the spreadsheet story. Now, back to those risks. Let's think about it for a minute. Poor understanding of customer needs, right? The PO really didn't understand what the customers, these these dealers wanted, their car dealers, what they really wanted. They just wanted really quick access to the data. They didn't want to navigate a whole bunch of screens. Unrealistic timeline and scope creep, well, that wasn't that much of a factor here, but it would have taken a lot more time to build what he wanted versus what the team did in 4 hours. Insufficient external collaboration. The PO clearly is not spending much time with the dealers. Not at all. Just thinks he knows what to do. That's an unmitigated risk. And poor ROI for the requested behavior. Guys asking for stuff that's going to take days or maybe weeks to implement and test for very little ROI, probably negative ROI. So let's move on to the next category, development and delivery execution risks, okay? Very interesting risks we see here. Of course, there's technical debt. Comes up everywhere. Emily talked about it this morning. Accelerating technical debt or deepening technical debt, whatever you want to call it. Slow, brittle delivery infrastructure. Experiencing this on a project I'm on right now where they have to spend more time fixing their delivery pipeline. It's just a little too, it fails. It was failing 4 out of 5 times last week. Too much WIP and poor cycle time. Right, WIP is work in process. And then premature refinement. Refining stuff that you're not ready to refine because, frankly, you don't have enough data about it. These are some common risks, right? As I said, with risk management, you can go nuts with lists of risks, but I had to pick 4, good ones. All right, let's go to another story. Don't tolerate software crashes was the headline of a full-page advertisement in the leading magazine for mass spectrometers. We all read that, right? Okay. A mass spectrometer is a machine commonly used for chemical analysis. This was a company we worked with for several years in north of Toronto. Wonderful, wonderful company. The words were in a very large font, and the ad featured a woman holding her head to her hand to her forehead, symbolizing the headache this software was causing her. This ad was a direct attack on the industry's leading maker of mass spectrometers, a manufacturer that had just hired my company for our Agile software services. That company was the leader in mass spectrometers. The code causing these crashes was a mess. It had all the hallmarks of bad software design. The programmers who maintained this code generally looked miserable, spending hours each day grappling with extreme complexity. They were consumed by fear since any change to this fragile code base could easily produce new defects. This was an old C++ code base, by the way. Surprisingly, management didn't seem to understand the magnitude of the problem. They wondered why the programmers were so slow. And to make matters worse, the product manager had a long list of new features to add to this product. New features. When the system wasn't even performing the basic functions for which it was sold. When customers were regularly experiencing debilitating software crashes. New features? No. The new features would have to wait. Since we got involved, we said, we are not working on new features. It was time to focus exclusively on fixing the quality and stability problems. So quality code tends to have small functions, each of which perform one responsibility, therefore making it easy to produce automated tests that check whether the functions work correctly. Large functions which contain many computer instructions are notoriously hard to test and prone to defects. I asked the programmers for a printout of the longest function in the code base. I literally went to my hotel. We were in the bar, and with my colleague, we taped it all up, and then I rolled it down the carpet, and then I filmed it. And this was like, I don't know, 2005, 4 or 5, something like that. And then the next day, I brought it into management, and I showed it to them. I showed them this, right? This story is called Make Problems Visible, by the way. And I wanted to make it really, really tangible for them, right? Since then, I have a better concept. I call it the sacred scroll. And you roll it all up, and then you ask them to just, start pulling it out like this. And it's more visceral that way. So anyhow, the video was a bit of a hit, and we convinced them that we had to completely work on the problem, the quality problems, okay? And we then went and we did chartering. Right? I'm a big disciple of a guy named 3 who, taught me chartering. We'll talk about that later. But we chartered, and we got super clear on what we were going to do. We had to be able to run the mass spectrometer for 48 continuous hours without it falling over on its face. That was the objective. That was what success would mean. So we had a vision and a mission, but that particular objective drove us, right? And we had to, I forget when we put our date on that, but that's what we were focused on as a team. We were all one team, a whole team focused on one thing, making this thing stable. New features, not happening. The product manager was very, very pissed at us, but the upper management believed this was the right call. So make problems visible so others can see the need for change and take action, right? You want to do this however you possibly can. Risks, accelerating technical debt. They had huge amount of technical debt, enormous amounts. Slow, brittle delivery infrastructure. The infrastructure wasn't the big deal there. Too much WIP and poor cycle time, absolutely. They had way too many things in progress, and they couldn't deliver. They did not deliver the software very often. Premature refinement wasn't a big deal for them. I guess what I'll say here, though, is just that, do you see the misalignment? The product manager is incented to create new features. The customers, the competitors are placing advertisements criticizing the company. The users are mad because this stuff, it literally reboots itself and it just falls apart when you're using it. Even though it's very good at what it does, it would just, you'd never know if it would get through a run. Total problems, I mean, real major problems. Luckily, we were able to help them, and what ended up happening with that story was it took about, I'd say 7 to 8 months of just pure, refactoring and testing and clamping things down and running automated tests, and eventually we released the new version. And there are people writing, the customers writing, and thank you so much. This is the most stable version of the product you've shipped in years. Thank you for what you've done. That was like the killer feature. It was just stability. And it was a really nice success. All right, organizational and people risks. So these ones are maybe very similar to ones you've seen. Poor cross-functional alignment. We just talked about that, right? The last story. A lot of people are just going in different directions, wanting to do different things. We're not a collective risk management group. Turnover and unskilled teams. So this one happens when you have, either they're unskilled and they're just not going to be able to produce great work, or everyone's leaving, right? You're seeing all kinds of churn. Wasted human potential. This one's really big. This one really bothers me. Because if you're, let's just say, a programmer and your product owner has no interest in your ideas for what to build, you've just wasted a brilliant mind's ideas. They're not being utilized. It's a terrible shame for that to happen. People are not just one role. They can perform other roles. Maybe not as good as the one role that they're a professional for, but people can perform other roles. It's happening all the time. Insufficient learning and improving. This happens all the time in many organizations. People are not improving and not learning enough. So here's another story. One morning at Westpac Bank in Wellington, New Zealand, you were just there, I think, a team of software developers paid a visit to the tellers who worked in the local bank branch. This was the developers' first time meeting their actual users. The visit had been arranged by Hamish King, a lean agile coach who'd recently joined the team. He knew how important it was for developers to get to know their customers, and he decided to do something about it. One of the developers on the team had been building software for the bank tellers for 10 years. He had always worked from requirements documents, but had never once met with a real-life flesh and blood teller. Can you imagine this? This is a bank. They can literally walk to where the tellers do the job, and this person has never actually met a bank teller. That's a true story. Before the local branch opened, the tellers met with the developers to discuss problems they experienced with the software and ideas they had for improvements. Once the bank opened, the developers watched the bank tellers at work. There were more developers around, but you get the idea, right? They're just observing them actually interacting with customers. One customer walked up to a teller with a slip of paper that indicated she wanted to deposit into her vacation savings account. The bank teller said he didn't know what the customer's vacation savings account was. There was no such thing in his system. The transaction would require an account number. Why? Asked the customer. The Westpac website allows me to nickname my accounts, and I named one of them vacation savings. That's where I want my money to go. The bank teller explained that he didn't have access to account nicknames. Sorry, I'll need your account number to proceed. The customer, looking visibly annoyed, managed to find the account number and completed the transaction. When the bank closed for the day, developers and bank tellers met again to produce a set of Post-it notes that they could stick on the wall, each one describing a proposed improvement. To prioritize this work, they roughly quantified the value of each improvement by looking at time saved per customer interaction, improved customer experience, reduction of errors, amount of work required to make the improvement, and so on. After assigning values to each Post-it, fixing the issue with the bank tellers not being able to see nicknamed accounts rose to the top of the list. A few days later, the developers returned with some paper prototypes that illustrated design choices for displaying nickname accounts on the teller's already busy screens. The tellers discussed pros and cons of each design with the developers and then selected their favorite. 2 weeks later, the developers returned to demonstrate the new design that was now in production and ready for the bank tellers to use. Said Hamish King, the joy on the faces of the bank tellers and developers was amazing to see because it was theirs. Collectively, that group had worked it all the way through from ideation to production. The collaboration between the developers and the staff of that local bank branch continued as they took on other problems and worked out improvements. Over time, the entire staff of the local bank branch adopted more agile practices such as agile planning, retrospectives on bank operations, and voting for improvements. All of this led to better service for Westpac customers and happier bank staff. Pardon? Oh, yeah, of course. That always does happen. Them or one of the other ones. So bring together people who can identify and solve problems. Close frequent collaboration increases agility, right? This seems so basic if you've been in the agile world for any length of time. It's just basic. And yet, it doesn't happen a lot of times. It's everyone's in a silo. Here's your requirements document. You're a builder. You go build it. You're not going to go observe anybody. You're not going to see them. You're not going to interact with them. You know, the guy who had been there for 10 years and had never met a teller, he became great friends with one of the tellers. That's what happened. Imagine that. Imagine what they would maybe talk about at lunch and maybe talk about some things that they'd like improved. I mean, that kind of relationship is fantastic for producing great software. So the risks, poor cross-functional alignment. Before Hamish got there, there was poor cross-functional alignment. They weren't even talking to each other, just talking through documents, requirements documents. The turnover in unskilled teams, I don't know if that was an issue there, but wasted human potential certainly was, right? The next story is a real wasted human potential one that we'll get to in a minute. Insufficient learning and improving. I think they had a tremendous opportunity to learn and improve once they started interacting with their customers. The tellers started learning a tremendous amount about Agile from the developers. Tons of cross-fertilization and tons of improvement, right? But there's a collective thing happening there. There's something collective. There's a risk management that's occurring once you bring everyone together and get them working together. You start to think about all of the different risks, not just the risks in your silo. Strategy and operational governance risks. Okay, let's look at these. So weak go-to-market execution, right? You go to market and nobody buys it because you have a very, very bad go-to-market strategy. Evolving regulatory blind spots. We work with many different federated agencies that are audited and this and that, so you have to be careful of this stuff. Or dysfunctional feedback loops. You don't have proper feedback loops in place to know about your product in the marketplace. Let's look about an intern at Amazon. This is one of my favorite stories. When Greg Linden was a summer intern at Amazon, he realized that the popular website wasn't yet offering personalized impulse buys. An impulse buy is an unplanned buying decision, usually made just before checkout. Chocolate bars, gum, tabloid magazines are typical impulse buys at grocery stores, purposely arranged at eye level to attract your attention. Greg realized that Amazon could take this a step further by suggesting personalized impulse buys based on the contents of the user's shopping cart. This was many years ago, okay? He was so excited about the idea that he quickly hacked together a prototype, installed it on an internal test website, and demonstrated the feature to others. Feedback was positive, except for one SVP, the SVP of marketing, who was not a fan. The SVP believed it was unwise to distract people during the all-important checkout process, potentially causing them to abandon the purchase altogether. The SVP told Greg that he was forbidden from working on the feature. Talk about wasted human potential. But Greg refused to give up. In his account of the story, he said, "I believed in the shopping cart recommendations. I wanted to measure the sales impact." He prepared a version of his feature for an online test, which would allow him to gather data from really a tiny fraction of Amazon users. When the SVP heard about the online test, he was furious. There's a lot of furious people in these stories, sorry about that. But he was unable to block it. And then the results came in. Greg recalls, not only did it win, but the feature won by such a wide margin that not having it live was costing Amazon a noticeable chunk of change. Remember the cost of delay? Amazon quickly launched Greg's feature. Personalized impulse buys at checkout would improve Amazon's revenue by 3%, resulting in hundreds of millions of dollars worth of additional sales. In some organizations, Greg would have been fired or penalized for disobeying an SVP. Hierarchy and the power to kill ideas merely based on opinion can severely limit innovation and revenue. Fortunately for Greg, even summer interns have the freedom to experiment at Amazon. Greg said everyone must be able to experiment, learn, and iterate. Position, obedience, and tradition should hold no power. For innovation to flourish, measurement must rule. Organizations that empower people to test ideas rather than merely obeying the hippo are more poised to innovate and adapt. So don't let seniority, obedience, or tradition impede innovation. Empower people to safely experiment and measure the impact of their ideas. This is pretty much phenomenal because most places don't have this. Most places don't have environments in which you can go and test an idea, especially in production, safely, on a tiny group of, it's not that it's rocket science, right? You should be able to do this with modern software and feature flags and so on and so forth, but he didn't even, it was so easy for him to do it that he could just do it because Amazon is serious about experimentation, right? So in some ways, this is not a wasted human potential story. It could have been. It could have been. Because who is this idiotic summer intern that's just here for the summer? What the hell do they know? Well, it turns out they know a lot. They know about, millions and millions of dollars of revenue a lot. It turns out that programmers, I do have a chip on my shoulder about this, is that programmers can actually have ideas about what the software should do. It's not just programmers. It could be testers. It could be an analyst. It could be it could be the UX designer. Might have an awesome idea for what the product should do. We are in a ridiculous mode in this industry where we have roles and responsibilities, and people have to live in those. And there's major risks in these ecosystems we're in software product development that we're not managing. If we manage them together as a group, we're going to do way better. And that's what collective risk management is trying to provide. So the risks here, I don't know. These are not so relevant in some ways here, but certainly there were dysfunctional feedback loops. That VP telling him, you cannot work on this, and him doing it anyway, it caused probably some fear and grief, but whatever. So how do you do this thing? How do you do collective risk management? Because I'm sure, it's nice to talk about it, but what do you do? What are the practices? I kind of came up with what I think are a bunch of these things that I think are related to it. These are the supporting practices to make collective risk management possible. Okay, so we're going to kind of walk through these real quick, and then we'll be done and we can get to the drinks. So chartering is near and dear to my heart. It is something that when I don't do it, I'm it's not good. The results are not good. In fact, if we go back to Refactoring to Patterns Interactive, we had not chartered. We did charter the next one. We spent days and days and days chartering. It was painful, but it was extremely helpful for the next many years of our work on our e-learning. Chartering is timeless and something I really recommend you learn. And it's continuous. A lot of people think we do the charter at the beginning. No, you do the chartering continuously. We made a cheat sheet about this, and there's a book called Liftoff. Oh, one of the authors is in the room. I knew I was going to do that. I knew I had a feeling. There was a voice in my head saying, you're getting the wrong image. But it's anyway, there's a new one. But this book is filled with wisdom about how to do this practice. And there's a second edition of it. It doesn't look like that you can get. So highly recommend it. The key is to doing it iteratively. So what you're seeing here is real. It's just I've made it hard for you to read. But it's we use Miro or Mural to do it with teams these days, and it's fantastic. I mean, it's utterly fantastic to do it this way. Even when we're in person, we'll sometimes, still use this. And I want to point out that there's a section down there, right? You see that section over there, the red part? That's the risk area. And there's a risk list. Now, risk lists have been around for decades. Many, many, many decades. It's really not about the fact that they've been around for decades. It's a matter of doing the work with the whole team, right? And when I say the whole team, I'm kind of including the sales and marketing and operations people, not just the developers and testers. It's the whole community. We call it often a product community. One day, the team on one of the projects just came up with this most wanted list and it was like, oh, great, whatever you want to do. That's your way of figuring out the highest priority risks to manage. But we would meet every single, week and go over this list and talk about it with the whole team. And that was very, very useful to us. It was great for managing risks. There's also continuous discovery. I'm a huge Teresa Torres fan. I think she puts out incredible content, and her books are really, really good. She's terrific. So continuous discovery is really addressing that risk of not knowing what the heck to build. You really can be doing this continuously. It's not so easy. My own daughter has started to get involved in this, and you quickly learn that people are busy and they don't want to talk to you. So you have to find a way to get to them and make it happen. But your weekly touch points are ideal, and you're trying to do some collaborative decision making on what to actually build. So a lot of analysis, a lot of deep understanding, but it really, really helps. So I think to do good risk management, you better be talking to the customers. And one thing Teresa mentions, as well as a guy named Marty Kagan, are these product trios. Now, I've talked to those two people before, and one of the mistakes I made was, in some ways, in the name. So I don't want you to make the same mistake as me. A product trio does not necessarily mean it's only 3 people. Okay? It could be 4, it could be 5. It's a small group. They call it the product trio just to make it a simple concept, but it's not in stone that it's only 3 people. You might have some others. The point is they're meeting regularly, and they are, de-risking. So it's a team sport, just like Jeff Patton said about product ownership. So everyone says everything's a team sport. A product trio is the minimum viable team for good discovery work, right? Whoever you might need for that. Because realistically, you're not necessarily going to have everyone on your team doing product discovery, right? But you could have a cross-section, and hopefully that includes a cross-functional cross-section. So you have a technical person, and you have a designer, and a product manager, at the very least, all having different ideas, okay? Another thing Marty talks about is empowered engineers. He has an excellent blog that I highly recommend you read called The Most Important Thing. And he says, empowerment of an engineer means that you provide the engineer with the problems to solve and the strategic context, and they are able to leverage technology to figure out the best solution to the problem. Again, it sounds really like good advice, but for the most part, engineers are given specific things to program. They are not given problems. They are not part of the risk management and the various thinking that goes into like, what could we do instead, right? This drives me nuts. You know, in extreme programming, we talk about or actually it's in the manifesto, maximizing the amount of work not done. One of the best ways to do that is to allow a smart group of individuals to think about all kinds of different ways to attack a problem, to solve a problem. Some of which could take a half a day to like 3 months. There's all kinds of ways to solve problems. If you don't do that, if you have an ordered backlog and you just hand it off to the developers, you're missing out on a tremendous amount of waste of time and energy. You're not doing collective risk management. So that's continuous discovery. Now this one here is one of my favorites. Role adaptation, right? Freedom to temporarily occupy a role. I'm working with a CEO now who happens to like ChatGPT and various other other AIs, and he's actually producing screen views and screen experiences of what the software could be like. He's really gung-ho about some features we're building for him, and he'll come and he'll show stuff that he built. It's HTML actually, because you know he got generated by you know some website, and he's kind of wearing that software developer role, even though he's a partner in a law firm and an entrepreneur. I mean, I think it's fantastic. Great. Keep doing it, Carl, because, you know, we like to see what you have in mind for this feature. We may not build it exactly the way you have it, but you're giving us your ideas. You're playing that role. Wonderful. And this applies to all sorts of things, right? I mean, one guy we just worked with, he uses Twitch. Anyone use Twitch and maybe do stuff on Twitch? We needed some component to have a better scrolling experience. And he came to work and said, well, in Twitch, they have this window, and it looks like this. And we all looked at it, and it has this great way of scrolling. That's perfect for what we need. So we never even talked to the UX designer on the project. We just implemented the Twitch scroll. And when we showed it to the UX designer, like, yeah, that works for me. You know, it looks fine. So here you have a programmer kind of playing the role of a UX person for a couple of hours. Wonderful. We do not have to have fixed roles and responsibilities. In fact, I think it detracts from our ability to do good risk management. And this is particularly the case for our summer intern at Amazon. Our summer intern at Amazon was a mini Jeff Bezos. He was an incredible entrepreneur, a programmer, a product manager. He was wearing a lot of hats. And that he was enabled to do it, fortunately, through that ecosystem they have there. So, you know, make role adaptation something that is easy to do. And then there's this book, Extreme Ownership, which talks about decentralized command, right? This is a big deal in the military, but it definitely applies to our world, right? Empowering people at every level to make decisions independently within the context of the overall mission. This is not just like complete freedom to mess around with anything. There's definitely guardrails. But within the guardrails, people can do these things I'm talking about. So in the book, he says, team members closest to the problem are often best positioned to make decisions quickly. Kind of like Agile 101 to some extent, right? But this is from a completely different domain. It's the military. And they know best that if you're down there in the core of this thing, you kind of have, you know what you're doing. Let those people make decisions, even if they're product decisions. Leaders must train, trust, and empower them to do so within defined boundaries. Boundaries are a thing. You need to set them. But you get so much wonderful things happening when people can make decisions at a low level. And you know, if you don't have this, you typically have bottlenecks, you have confusion, and you have failure under pressure. I see this all the time. Worked with different product managers before, and the kind that are really, really attached to being the control freaks, the ones that have to make every decision, that leads to a lot of bottlenecks, a lot of frustration, and it's just way too slow, especially for startups. It just doesn't work. Whole team or product community or whatever you want to call it, cross-functional team. This was from a real project we did once. Where, you know, to us, it's never a small team. If you think about all the people involved to really make it happen, that's your team. That's the big product community, we call it. And it's good to know who those people are. And we do that when we do it on Mural. When we're on Mural, we'll define all those folks, and they're all there in the meeting saying who they are. And so we have ability to be a collective because we've really gotten to know each other. We know who's involved and who does what. Who's the legal person we need to go to when we want to show the beta software to a customer? We should know that legal person rather than like begging their time later on because we never met them. Psych safety is also plays a supporting role in collective risk management. Because if you don't have psychological safety, you will not feel safe to try things, to speak up, to do all those things. I've been talking about psych safety now for a very long time. So, and I don't know, most of you, I would assume, know something about psychological safety at this point. Here are some of the things that Amy Edmondson says, that are required for you to really have psychological safety. So, next steps, and then we're finished here, right? Next steps for you to try are pretty much what we've already talked about. Start continuously chartering. Start continuously discovering. Start to work with a true whole team. You cannot do collective risk management if you're not really teaming together. Definitely keep focusing on psychological safety or the lack thereof. Everything I'm showing up here is hard, by the way. It's very hard. Psych safety, I've had experiences with it. It is difficult. Role adaptation, that's not that hard. You just put on a different kind of frog costume. And then decentralized command, right? Trying to come up with the boundaries or guardrails inside of which people can make decisions without it being bottlenecked. Also, there's great books to read. I love everything Jim Highsmith writes, but Agile Project Management was one of my favorite books, and it's still extremely good. It's older now. I forget how old. It's probably, I'm going to say, 15 years old, or at least, maybe more. And it's still packed with fantastic wisdom. Jim Highsmith's one of the signers of the manifesto. He's written many books, but this was truly remarkable. And I happen to like, Tom DeMarco and Tim Lister's book, Waltzing with Bears, which is a good book on risk management. But there's many other books on it. And if you're interested in this topic, start studying it. I think you'll benefit from that. Have a reading group on it. So, collective risk management, it isn't nothing and it isn't everything. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Joshua. Do we have to call it risk management? Can we call it opportunity management? Can we call it collaborative opportunity? Everything you talked about there, it was a risk, but what you talked to us about was opportunity. It's not a negative story. All of those were happy stories. Let's end on a happier note. We do have some time for questions, Martin, do we? Questions for Joshua? Anyone? Well, the lure of those drinks.
Yeah, and I'll just say, this is a new talk, so if you have feedback for me, I'd love to hear it, even at the break or whatever, so I can improve.
Shocked silence.
Hi, I'm Morten Elvang. It's not really a question as such, but what you talk about resonates a lot with what I looked at some years ago, which is a more collaborative approach to lean portfolio management, extending on whatever SAFE did, for better or worse.
Yeah.
I'd love to discuss that over drinks.
Sure, absolutely, yeah.
What a sensible, happy addendum to that question. Okay. We do have questions at drinks. Let's wrap it up. Joshua, thank you so much.
Thanks again.